Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, we have an amazing show today and a great guest, Patricia Cornwell, and I'll get more into her later on, but I'm just so thrilled to have her on the show on the heels of putting out her new book. So it's going to be really exciting. So hold on to your hats, hold on to your toupee, your wig, whatever you got to hold on to, your service dog. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Branch by Collider.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Folks, we have a new sponsor, and I'll get right to it. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with over our 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. Okay, guys, so we have, as I just previously mentioned, we have amazing true crime author, Patricia Cornwell, who I've read a number of her books even before I asked to get her on the show. So without further ado, let's welcome Patricia Cornwell. Welcome, Patricia.
Bill, it's so nice to be here. I've been looking forward to this. You know, I am such a big police fan, and I'm sorry I didn't meet you in your homicide detective glory days before your big show here, because I would have been asking you to please let me ride along, because that's some of the best things I ever did. It had to do with the police. That's where I learned so much about crime. You know, I was a police reporter, and then I was a volunteer officer in Richmond. And what I did was every weekend I'd ride with people just like you, the homicide detectives, and that's where I learned so much. And I also learned that people do not begin to appreciate law enforcement the way they should.
You know, Patricia, I've had people in the car riding along with us, and sometimes you forget, like, when it gets too hairy, you got to sort of like drop them off, get out of the car. The shit's hitting the fan. You know, you don't want to be here. But, you know, they were excited to be there, to see real police work and how it actually goes. And then, of course, when they're on the scene and there's an actual murder, they can't, when, you know, fantasy hits reality, and reality is much, much darker than fantasy for sure.
Oh, people, you know, you just really can't appreciate what it's like for somebody unless you're literally walking their moccasins, as the old saying goes. And if you do a ride along with police, and if you spend time with them, you get a vision of life that's different than anything you imagined. And you also get a vision of them. Now, listen, there's good and there's bad in every profession. And I've ridden with some officers that I wouldn't want to ride with twice, but most of the ones I met and most of the detectives I've met in these long years I've been doing this they've just been nothing but an inspiration, and they're funny. Some of the funniest things ever happen when you're out, when you're, I guess, in the face of such horror sometimes. I remember one time I was riding with the Richmond police, and we had a call of an armed person in a house and that they had to respond to, and I'm with them. And so we get there and we get out of the car and we're going up and I'm going up the steps, and all of a sudden this hand is on the back of my shirt pulling me back, and I turn around and the captain said, do you mind if I go first?
You're a civilian. You're the boss.
And I thought, what am I doing? I mean, I'm storming here with my little notepad. I mean, it's silly me, but there's so many things that we laugh about, but then also the pathos, because this one detective that I rode with all the time back in those early years when I was just creating Scarpetta, this really lovely guy named Glenn Williams, and I rode with him often, and we had the serial murders started, the South Side strangling cases, and that's what was the inspiration of Postmortem, my very first book. And it was harrowing. These detectives were working, and you know this feeling because you've done this. These police were never had a moment's peace because they couldn't catch who this was. And he'd already killed 3 or 4 women, and this was continuing to happen. And it was so stressful and exhausting. And so one morning, and they still hadn't caught the guy. So one morning I'm driving to work because I was the computer analyst at the ME's office, and I'm in my little Honda driving to work, and I hear over the radio that Glenn had committed suicide.
Oh,
and I remember he used to show me his pistol in the car. He was one of the first ones to own a pistol, you know, that his personal gun. I don't remember what kind it was, but he was very proud of that. And that's what he shot himself with. Well, so I get to the ME's office, and I'm not in a happy mood about this, to say the least. I'm shocked, actually. I just can't even think. So I walk in, and he's in the X-ray room. So this is the thing. This is someone you know, which is kind of what Scarpetta has to deal with in this new story where someone's been killed that is someone, and it's someone she knows. So I went in to the X-ray room, and he was on the table. I mean, this is reality. You know it. I mean, I don't want to be too graphic for people. And I look at this teeny tiny little hole in his chest that seemed so small for something so devastating. And I just was so sad. And I said, I wish you hadn't done this, but you must have had a reason. And he'd gotten in a fight, I think, or a disagreement. And I think he was just fed up. But some of it's the strangling cases. He was one of the victims, frankly, because of that killer. But these are, you can't see things like this and be the same person. And so I am not the same person I was before I started all this, whether it's my attitude about law enforcement, my attitude about violence, my attitude about the way the public should be so supportive of those who protect us. You know, because if you've been out there and you see it, you realize how much we need to have good people out there taking care of us.
100%. Patricia, I'm going to let the audience know a little bit more about you as we proceed here. Patricia Cornwell has sold over 100 million books. She sold her first novel, Postmortem, while working as a computer analyst at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Richmond, Virginia. Postmortem was the first bona fide forensic thriller. It paved the way for an explosion of entertainment featuring in all things forensic across film, television, and literature. Patricia's novels center primarily on medical examiner Kay Scarpetta, along with her tech-savvy niece Lucy and fellow investigator Pete Marino. Celebrating 25 years, these characters have grown into an international phenomenon, winning Cornwell the Sherlock Award for Best Detective created by an American author, the Gold Dagger Award, the RBA Thriller Award, and the Medal of Chevalier of the Order of Arts and Letters for her contributions to literary and artistic development. I mean, I could keep reading, but you're here, so why should I keep reading? That's truly amazing. I mean, do you feel like these characters are like your babies, that you hold them close to your heart?
You know, I suppose I do, but I almost think of them as friends in a weird way. I mean, I feel like I know them really well, and it gives me comfort when I'm writing about them and they're on the screen. You know, I feel like I'm around people I know. And I'm watching what they're doing, so to speak. But you know, now that I have a television show about to start about all this, I've been getting myself ready. And this is because we first started talking about it 4 years ago. Jamie Lee Curtis and I did, you know, and now it's about to start filming next month. And when I've had to get more open about realizing that they're not just my characters. They are kind of their own people, and they will be interpreted somewhat differently when you have actors playing them. And I'm sure when people read about them, they have a different vision of them than I might while I'm writing about them. So they're sort of like family, I guess, to me.
Yeah, I mean, let me just, I'll put that up on the screen, what you were just talking about.
Nicole Kidman and Jamie Lee Curtis are teaming up to play TV siblings. Deadline reports the A-listers are set to star in an upcoming Prime Video show based on Patricia Cornwell's mega popular K. Scarpetta book series. Taking to Instagram on February 8th, the author celebrates the news, writing, "Scarpetta friends, we've waited 33 years for this." According to Deadline, Nicole will star as Scarpetta, a forensic pathologist crime fighter, and Jamie as her sister Dorothy. Plus, they'll both serve as executive producers on the project, ordered for 2 8-episode seasons. Jamie, who was recently nominated for her first Oscar thanks to her performance in Everything Everywhere All at Once, bought the K. Scarpetta book rights back in June 2021. And
How exciting. I don't want to play the whole thing because it's more or less just featuring them and not you. Amazing, right? I mean, isn't that the goal of every writer to get something on the big screen?
I mean, I don't even have words for it, especially after I've waited this long. And I'll tell you a funny story about that. In 1992, when Demi Moore was interested in playing Scarpetta, and we spent some time together. And this was the fall of 1992. I was out with her and her trainer on Pacific Coast Highway in the Malibu area, and I'm trying to keep up with them, by the way. She was in much better shape than I was. But I'm, huffing and puffing along with her and her trainer along the sidewalk there. And Jack Klugman is walking toward us. And for those who would remember, Jack Klugman played Quincy,
yes,
millions of years ago. And so I said to me, the old Quincy just passed the new one, meaning her, if she played Scarpetta. Well, if you had told me in 1992 that it will be 33 years later that this would actually hit the air, because it will be 2025 next year when I believe when we see this on TV, we see Scarpetta on TV. But if you had told me that it would take that long, I would have been absolutely heartbroken. But that's how long. I mean, it's been a crazy journey. And I had gotten to a point where I didn't think it was ever going to happen. And then Jamie made it happen because she decided to pick up that ball and run with it. She's the producer. And she has brought it across the finish line. And she's such a wonderful person. She's a really good person, kind, thoughtful, and funny. And oh my God, she's funny in real life. And so when I write about Dorothy now, that's who I see. I see Jamie. And actually, Dorothy's becoming a better character in my books because I'm inspired by Jamie Lee Curtis.
That's great. Patricia, how difficult is it to write dialogue?
That's a good question. And I'll tell you, it's very difficult because people do not speak the way you think they do. I mean, it, I know it. We use strange communication sometimes. And so how do you capture that in a way that's realistic dialogue in writing? And the key to it is you've got to listen to how people talk. And I'll tell you what I used to do. I used to sit in restaurants by myself when I was traveling a lot on research trips and things long ago. And I would sit in a restaurant alone or a bar, and I would secretly take notes and write down what I heard people saying. And I would eavesdrop. And I would hear, and it was amazing, the way people express themselves. If you start to listen with that kind of ear, then when you're writing dialogue in a book that it's not complete sentences. Sometimes it's a non sequitur where, Benton Scarpetta will say to Benton, "What do you want for dinner?" And then he'd say, "Have you seen my glasses anywhere?" "I don't know, but if Marino texts me one more time, I'm going to kill him." And then Benton says, "Well, I don't know where Lucy is either." And then he says, "Oh yeah, I'd like spaghetti." Okay. So that is the way people talk.
Yes, and something, you picked that up because you listen and you're a writer and you're trying to, because you're right. It would be, look, when I watch certain police TV shows, I cringe when they do certain shit. And the one thing that drives me nuts is the reading of Miranda right on the street immediately after arrest. I just will say, will you stop doing that shit? No one has done that in the history of policing. Stop it.
Yeah. Well, you know what my pet peeve is? When they refer to the slab they refer to the autopsy table as the slab. And this is what, this is stuff that's been repeated forever, but from going to the morgue in New York City, they don't call it a slab in there. When someone might in slang, but it's a steel table. We talk about the body on the table. It's not a slab. A slab goes back to the Victorian era and before, where literally bodies were autopsied like on a marble slab. Now we've got these ventilated tables and all this fancy stuff. I mean, so yes, I know what you mean. And you need to be aware of what's going on out there, and you should listen to how people talk. And Hemingway is a very good author to read. He is one of the best you'll ever read with dialogue.
Patricia, one of the greatest police shows I've ever seen for dialogue, and I don't know if you're probably familiar with it, was The Wire on HBO. They not only got the language of the street down perfectly. And I was like, holy shit, this is amazing, And there was literally a show they did one time where they had a retirement party and they had the bagpipes. I was like in tears watching it, And I was like, that's effective communication when you can make an old homicide sergeant have tears running down his face watching this. Unbelievable,
Well, what you're, and one of the things what you're kind of pointing at is, if for those who are going to create police stories, you better spend some time with police. And, it's a little harder today than it was when I was getting started. It was easy being a ride along long ago, but there's so many things we have to get people worry about today. Getting sued is a big one. And so departments, I don't know how many of them still allow citizen ride-alongs, but I think if you are going to write dialogue as an author or a screenwriter, then you should go ride some shifts with these people and listen to the way they talk and watch what they do, and so that you can get it right. You may not get it as right as they're going to get it, because they this is what they do for a living. This is who they are. But at least make an attempt at it. If nothing else, it also shows your respect for that profession, to try to see what it is and reflect it honestly.
100%, because I think people have a lot of ideas that do come from TV and cinema and not from necessarily reality. Patricia, I want to make sure I plug your book, because that's the whole reason you're here. So let's, Patricia Cornwell, Identity Unknown. This is the latest. It's actually due to come out on October 8th. Legendary thriller writer Patricia Cornwell brings Chief Medical Examiner Kay Scarpetta to new extremes with Identity Unknown. On sale as of October 8th, 2024. Dr. Kay Scarpetta has seen it all during her extensive career as Chief Medical Examiner, overseeing complex autopsies and juggling the political and social pressures that come with murder investigations and highly sensitive national security concerns. Summoned to an unnerving abandoned theme park to retrieve a body, Scarpetta is devastated to learn that the victim is a man she once loved. While teaching in Rome during the early days of her career, Scarpetta had a love affair with acclaimed astrophysicist Sal Giordano that led to a lifelong friendship. The murder scene is bizarre, with a crop circle of petals around the body, and Giordano's skin is strangely red. Scarpetta's niece in the Secret Service, Lucy, believes he was dropped from an unidentified flying craft. Scarpetta knows an autopsy can reveal the dead's secrets, but she is shocked to find her friend seems to have deliberately left her a clue. That's all I'm going to read, because the people better buy this damn book, and they're not going to get it from me in the show. Well, I mean, it's amazing how you intertwine the different relationships. And of course, the point that you were once lovers with this man who is now going to be the subject of an autopsy is, people, I don't think, could even imagine that. But see,
that gets back to what you and I were talking about if you are actually out there for real. This is what happens with police, that sometimes, you're called someplace and you go, uh-oh, I hope this isn't where I think it is. And then it turns out it's someone you know. And so the relationships, if you don't care about the people, then I'm not sure why you would care about the story. So I think the relationships between the characters are very, very important. And Scarpetta, we need to know that she has the capacity to feel something very deeply, the horror of this being someone you care about. But at the same time, just like you law enforcement folks, you do your job. You have to. You can't say, oh, I can't do this, because no, you got to do it. You got to do it. That's part of your loving that person, is you're going to take care of them right to the bitter end.
Absolutely. I remember as 9/11 was that day and the days following that, how people would just be crying in the detective squad because they heard that a good buddy died at the scene, because it took a while to find out who were the people that lost their lives that day. In the way of firemen, there was 343 firemen. And in regards to New York City NYPD, it was 23. And then the Port Authority had, I forget exactly how many, and they were just as important as everyone else. I apologize for not remembering how many they lost, but we all knew people that died. So New York City being almost like a small little community, yes, it was horrible. And just to go back to what you're talking about, to bring reality to that we actually knew people that lost their lives, and not just in 9/11, but in regular homicide duties and precinct duties, you would invariably come upon a person that was murdered that you knew.
Right. It's a small world. And like Da Vinci said, everything's connected. And so, these, and that's the thing with what police do. It comes home to roost in so many ways, because even if it isn't somebody that it might impact you because it reminds you of something else. Or a real common thing, when I used to ride with the police a lot, is they always had, of course, and for good reasons, really difficult times when you're talking about children who are victims. And then I would hear the detectives talking to me about how hard it was. They'd go home and to their own kids, and they're thinking about what they just saw. And they see things that nobody should have to see, and but the funny thing about it is, what always amazed me about cops from day one, when I first started when I was a police reporter right out of college, is that if you will make an effort to be open-minded, to try to care about what they do, the police have always been, very receptive and very generous. The very first, I remember, if I had never ridden along with a police captain when I worked at the Charlotte Observer, this really nice guy who would take me around, I never would have discovered some of my best stories. And while it was going on, I began to learn what the streets were like, and I began to have some respect for what it's like to be in a uniform, standing out there and doing these things, or being a detective and ending up at a terrible murder scene. But when I became a volunteer police person in Richmond, and you'll like this story, because just to show you how goofy I was, and probably still am. Well, of course, I got a uniform. I was called a neighborhood assistance officer. Oh, that's to be feared, right? And so, but I had my uniform and my whistle and all my stuff, and I loved that. I think I have terrible uniform envy. But anyhow, so this sergeant of the homicide squad had agreed that I could do a ride along with him. And so I thought, I am so excited. I'm going to get to ride with Sergeant Harding, someone like you. So I show up at his office in my uniform. Okay. He's a detective. And he looks at me and he said, now he said, so where do you live? And I said, well, I live over there, near blah, blah hospital. He said, okay, well, it's a little bit out of the city, but I tell you what, we'll scoot over there so you can go inside and change your clothes, and then we'll go ride around. It's like, this is detectives. We don't wear uniforms. It's like when I went to the CIA and wanted a business card, and people go, we don't do business cards. We're spies.
That's right. You meant well, though. From the chat, Pammy, I just used my Audible credit to pre-order. So at least you sold one book so far, Patricia. So
well, I appreciate that. Most of all, I hope people have a good time with the story.
You can add that to the 100 million. Now you have 100,000,001. So
that's perfect.
Razmataz, thank you for the $10 super sticker. Patricia is my favorite author. Wow, amazing. Kim Alliston. Sherry, I met a lady from Washington, D.C. here in all Great Britain, UK, and the lady informed me that she loved Patricia Cornwell books. Wow. There's a lot of love in the chat today.
Well, good. Well, a lot of love back to everybody. Thank you for your kind words.
Bama Chin, awesome. I've read everything Patricia has written. Body Farm was one of my favorites. Wow.
Yeah, Body Farm was one of my favorites too, to be honest with you. I like that story, and oddly, now that we're talking about it, I set that in the Asheville, North Carolina area, which is the very area where I grew up, and which has been so decimated by the hurricane. My little town pretty much washed away, which is my heart goes out to everybody that's dealing with all that.
That's so horrible, right? Patricia, I know that to write what you write, you have to keep up on the science of investigation. And there are so many changes now in the science of investigation vis-a-vis investigative genetic genealogy has changed the game in the world of crime investigation. Your thoughts? Have you incorporated that in any of your books yet?
The one I'm working on right now, I'm actually going to be playing around with that where something in DNA causes you to realize that somebody's related to somebody in a way that is like, what? So yes, I am aware of all that, and I do give it thought because it's an incredible tool. And most of all, what's so interesting is that people don't realize, when they're getting their DNA because they're curious about their ancestry, inadvertently they have created this massive database, which I'm grateful. I'm glad it's there, and that there are ways now that even if you didn't do something, your cousin might have had something to do with it, and this can be picked up. I think that's and rapid DNA, and that we're getting to the point now. Imagine this, you go back to your police department and you put your swab in one of these scanner things and you get the DNA that you just took from the swab of a suspect. And now you're running that through CODIS, and within no time at all that you have a candidate for who might have left or that see that suspect matches something that you're looking into. And you're not waiting days or long ago, weeks, maybe months to get results while that offender is going out there and doing it some more.
I always thought that if you could have gotten DNA back while you had the person in the interrogation room, it would be so helpful because you would have the answers to the things that the person is lying to you about right there. And that day is coming where every precinct will probably have a DNA machine where you just put the DNA sample and it goes right into the CODIS database and you get an ID right there.
Think of your crime center, NYPD. Think of that which was like so high tech when that first was, you go in there and they're running your whole background. You're looking at it right in front of you. But you put that with eventually quantum computing and artificial intelligence, and then you've got the instant DNA identification stuff. I mean, you could be at the crime scene and this thing's connecting stuff or in an interview, better yet, and you're getting information about this person. Like you suddenly find out that, that he grew up with an aunt and the aunt mysteriously died. And then he got moved to live with his grandmother and the grandmother mysteriously died. And then so you're saying at the table, how many people have died while you staying with them? And I'm supposed to think you didn't do it to this one here? And they go, what do you mean how many people? I'll just tell you their names. And it's like, where did you get that? So
that was some good sound effects you did there.
But so the possibilities are amazing, but by that same token, you've got to have officers who are really well trained and really smart, and who exercise the judgment to know that sometimes, like, you might get a hit on DNA, but that doesn't mean that person did it. You got to find out why that DNA was there. Why was it under someone's fingernails? Is that really, or why was it in their body? Like in a sexual assault homicide, and you find something, and is that really from the killer, or is that from the night before with somebody that was not the killer?
Right, exactly.
So it's no matter how smart all these technologies go or get, we've got to have really good professionals who are at the helm, or they can get out of control and something is misinterpreted and misunderstood that causes havoc.
Patricia, there were two detectives in Manhattan Special Victims, Eddie Tacky and Alan Sandomir. And they were in charge of what was known as cold hits. cold sex crime hits. And they would go to prison where the perp wanted for a sexual assault, rape, whatever, was incarcerated. And that's what you were talking about is exactly what they would do. They would have the DNA hit, but they would first have to shut all the doors because, of course, what's the first thing an offender is going to say? It was consensual, right? That's the first. So they had to say, have you ever been in this building before? Never. Have you ever been in this apartment? You know, and I'm cutting to the chase. I'm fast forwarding it. Have you ever met this woman before? And they would show a picture of the victim. And then they would sign a statement, no, 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 no. And then they said, okay, your DNA was inside that woman. You raped her. And then because the guy was so disarmed by the technique they used for him to deny everything, now, you know, he was nailed. And that's how they would do it. And again, I cut to the chase. It takes hours and hours to get to that point.
Well, and that's what, and that's exactly what I'm saying is that no matter what information or technology you have, even if it's almost like an instant replay on a video of what someone did, the person that's doing that interview has got to have their wits about them, because these other people, they'll take those same facts and try to outsmart you with something. And then you have to deal with what the prosecutor or the defense attorney is going to do. And so there's a lot of things that have to be going through your head.
Well, you know, some of the new technology, and I know have to know all about all of this stuff, but we have a case, and I don't know if you, well, a lot of the true crime people have done it. Took place in Kissimmee, Florida, where this guy named Stefan Stearns basically raped and murdered his girlfriend's daughter, and who he had been having sex with. He lived with them from the age of 9 till she was 13. And some of the real amazing technological things were just the license plate reader. The license plate reader got this guy going really right to the damn crime scene where he dumped the body, as well as an eyeball witness. But all of those technological things that we take for granted, and of course, cell phones are a treasure trove of GPS, of all kinds of information. And they found on his cell phone, they found 1,700 pornographic images of this poor little girl.
Wow.
And that in itself can put him in prison for life. And that's what nailed him at first. And they were still investigating, still didn't have the body. And then eventually they found the body. He got charged with the murder also. But technologically, all the video, he was caught on video driving in and out of the condo complex with her dead body in the front seat. Oh, he said she was sleeping. You know, people don't sleep. Dead people don't sleep like that, right?
Yeah.
You look totally different when you're dead as compared to when you're sleeping. But anyway, it's just the technology is just incredible. And you mentioned before AI. AI is unbelievable. It also is scary.
Yeah, it is scary, but it's inevitable. It's already here. You know, usually when you're talking about something's coming, it's probably already on your doorstep or maybe already in the house. But you know, I can see it even when I Google that how sophisticated things are getting, that it's reading it because of so many things I've looked for. It knows what I'm thinking. It fills in the field literally before I've even begun to type enough for it to really should be knowing what I'm asking. So I'm seeing the changes. And I think for the most part, I feel that this is going to be a very, very valuable tool that overall can be very helpful to humanity, but it's not without tremendous risks, especially depending on those who create the algorithms and those who put the data out there, that in some ways could be harmful. You know, if you have an algorithm that is looking for this and this and this and this, and therefore it deduces that this type of person will commit a crime or won't commit a crime, and it might be wrong because of human input. And human bias is the biggest thing. As you know, that's the biggest threat to all this, is our own bias that contaminates it, so to speak. But I'm hoping it's overall going to be refined and rise above our own, you know, incompetence at times and our own bad behavior. I'd rather I want to treat it as a friend. I think the best thing to do is to try to treat it as a friend and a valuable tool, because it certainly can be. And the alternative of it not being a friend is not something I want to think about.
Right. Well, you know, it's the same thing even with some of the other technological things. Shot spotter, tremendous tool. Some places are already doing away with it because they're saying, oh, it's prejudicial to certain people. Facial recognition, same thing. There are places that want to get rid of facial recognition. It's not the 100% identifier. It's a tool. It's a tool like anything else. But two great things: shot spotter and facial recognition. Many locales want to get rid of it for various different reasons.
Well, listen, human bias is extremely dangerous. It's not helpful, but the better thing to do is to try to strive to not have that in the mix. And if facial recognition, if there seems to be a bias, then let's try to get that bias out of the algorithm. Don't get rid of facial recognition, because it's a really valuable tool. I mean, if it's helping us, solve crimes or find missing people or who knows what, I don't think you should throw that tool to the side. I think you should try to perfect it with any of these applications that we're using to try to give us a leg up. But like, especially when you're dealing with international terrorists, if you want to identify somebody coming through an airport, facial recognition is your best opportunity for that.
100%. It keeps us safe. Who is Sal Giordano in real life?
Who did what?
Who is Sal Giordano?
Oh, Sal. He's not anybody. He's not really anybody I know. I just imagined, I've met a lot of really cool NASA people, and I don't know. Some of these characters, they just sort of appear, and I just wanted, they just evolve as I'm writing, and I don't really dream them up front. And then I start seeing what they're looking like, or how do they dress, and they sort of appear. So and a lot of people think Scarpetta is based on a real person, and she's not. I mean, her inspiration is Dr. Marcella Fierro, who is the wonderful forensic pathologist who, that I worked with for years and who's been my mentor. But that the character's not anybody I ever met. And when I first started creating her, it wasn't anybody. I don't know where she came from, really. She may be a combination of a lot of people or something, but I think that's part of what's interesting about creativity, is that we get ideas and sometimes we don't know where they came from.
Patricia, that's so interesting, because you absolutely have to be a student of life. And I used to jokingly say, when someone would say, "What are you doing here?" I'd be, we're trained observers, and that's really what a really good writer is a trained observer of the human condition, and understanding the human condition is so important. And you said something interesting, like sometimes these characters just come to you. And I thought it was very interesting, just to make a quick comparison. Paul Simon, the great singer-songwriter, was done. He said, "I'm retired. I'm not writing anymore." So, and he was supposedly, and this is an amazing story, he was in bed and he woke up, and this whole album came to him while he was sleeping, and he got up in the middle of the night and he started recording, which I was like, that's unbelievable. It's almost like a divine inspiration you're getting just from his talent and from everything else. But have you ever felt like that something came to you in the middle of the night and you had to write it down quick before you forgot it?
Well, not quite to that extent, but I have had many moments where, again, you're getting ideas or characters that they're like walk-ons in a play. Like you're looking at a stage and you have this person and this character and that character, and all of a sudden this character comes walking in. You go, "Where'd you come from and who are you?" And then they go, "Well, blah, blah, blah," and I go, "I don't know where that one came from." But I have a theory that we don't create things as much as we conduct them. That something, if you are open to ideas, open to wonder, to mysteries, that things will come to you. And that might be sort of what happened to Paul Simon in that story you're telling. And I would say the same thing can happen in law enforcement, where you're working on a really difficult case, like a serial murder case, like the one I was telling you about earlier. And sometimes if you just can let everything go for a little bit, something may float up from the ether. Your intuition that goes, the kid that was standing over there by that tree, I kept thinking, why is he bothering me? There's something I need. And then next thing you know, you found it. Now you just got to prove it.
That's pretty cool. Conversely, Keith Richards woke up one night in a stupor, and he played the riff for Satisfaction. And he said, "Thank God I recorded that. I would have forgot it."
Well, he might have really been channeling since he was hardly present while he was doing it.
Exactly. Good thing I listened. Oh,
And by the way, I've written in a similar Keith Richards, state of mind after getting into the tequila bottle. And I can trust you. The next day I hit the delete button. It's not something anyone's going to ever listen to. I go, Scarpetta. I go, I don't even know what she's saying right now. Anyway,
that's pretty cool. Carol Grayston has gifted five police off the cuff memberships. Carol, thank you so much, and the folks that you gifted them to, thank you also. Now you seem to have. I see all the pictures on your bio site, and you have a pretty damn full life. Are you a pilot also? Oh.
I have my helicopter private pilot's license, and so I used to do a whole lot of flying because and even had my own helicopters for a number of years. But now I don't own a helicopter, but I do still fly. I go. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I went flying. I fly out of a helicopter charter service in Richmond, Virginia. The same people that I started with, and so I will go and I go fly with my friend Whit, and we go buzzing around, and it's something that I just love to do. One of my more memorable helicopter flights very early on is when I was doing research from Potter's Field, and you know what Potter's Field is, of course, Hart Island, right? Isn't that the name of it? I think.
Yes.
And so I had just been doing some stuff with the police in New York, and we were flying away, and we flew over Potter's Field, and we just happened to fly over it at the time that the inmates from Rikers Island had come in with the barge with all loaded up with the pine boxes from the medical examiner's office, because they bury those people unclaimed dead and so forth on Potter's Field. But that was an eerie sight to see guards down there with long guns and the inmates with all these caskets. And so, and in a helicopter, you could see all that really well. I was waiting for the guards to shoot us down, thinking we were trying to help them escape.
Now, Patricia, isn't that part of really being a good writer is to immerse yourself in life too?
Being a good writer is being a good storyteller. And to tell a good story, you have to have something to say. And to have something to say, most likely you need to learn something, because unless you're a know-it-all, there's a lot there's a lot you can't talk about. And I happened, when I was in college, I went to a high school where you didn't have to ever take a book home. I never took a book home the whole time I was in high school. You didn't have to study. It was easy. When we studied Romeo and Juliet, we went to the movie. We didn't even have to read it. That kind of place. Oh, yeah. Well, when I got to college, I didn't know anything. I've never written a term paper. I didn't know. I thought George Eliot, who's a huge literary, I thought that was a man. It was really a woman with a man's name. I didn't know anything. So I had a necklace way back then. It was just a little gold rectangle with nothing on it. And the jeweler couldn't understand why I didn't want my initials engraved on it. I wanted nothing on it. And I said, this is my tabula rasa, which means blank slate in Latin. I said, because if there ever was one, c'est moi. It is me. So I wore my tabula rasa all through college to remind myself that I came in with not a single scratch in my brain, and will hope I don't leave that way.
That's so great, because some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life will always say, I'm forever a student. I'm never the finished product of being, as you said, the know-it-all. No, if you don't think you can learn, even from that 12-year-old kid over there, that's snot running down his face, you can learn something from anybody. And as long as you take that position, I think, in life, you're gonna do okay, I think.
Well, everybody should take that position in life because it's also what makes life interesting. And it's the same thing with if you're going to be a good investigator. Don't just rest on your laurels. Always learn the newest thing that's going on out there because it might have a bearing on something you're doing, or it might even have a bearing on something the bad guys are doing. Good example, cybercrime, and these gangs out west that are using signal jammers. They're making their own signal jammers and taking out your Wi-Fi. So in a smart house, which by the way, always have a landline somewhere if you've got a smart house, because if someone takes out your Wi-Fi, you got nothing, no phone, no alarm system, no cameras. So you need to know what's possible because the bad people are looking constantly at what's possible so they can have an advantage. So you must never stop learning. If nothing else, it's a survival skill.
That's unbelievable. I got to plug your book again. Folks, this is Patricia Cornwell. Her book is Identity Unknown. You can pre-order it, but it's available as of October 8th. You can go on Amazon. You can pre-order it. And I started reading it. I got halfway through. So I didn't want to tell you, yes, I read the whole thing. I didn't read the whole thing. I'm halfway through the book. It's fantastic.
Oh,
and I've read
you.
many of your books. Years ago, you were doing something at John Jay. I forget exactly. And I read a couple of your books. I forget exactly. You were establishing something at John Jay College.
And I've also have spent some time over there because one of my friends, I haven't seen him in a while. You may know him. Do you know Lou Schlesinger? You know, the forensic psychologist.
Yes, I know the name.
Yeah.
I got my master's at John Jay. So.
Yeah, and he teaches. I mean, he's really fascinating. That there's nothing he hadn't seen. And I mean, literally, he's if there's a real Hannibal Lecter, I think Lou Schlesinger's met him for sure. But that I've had a lot of talks with him about profiling because that's Benton Wesley, my character who's married to Scarpetta, is a profiler, and Lou, he was the first one that ever helped me to really understand that when you're dealing with serial crimes, that what you're really dealing with is a compulsion. They're compulsive homicides that somebody cannot stop themselves from doing what they do, like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer. That it isn't just we don't think of it that way, but if you think of any compulsion that humans have, and then you give someone that kind of compulsion, that they are compulsively, what they're really addicted to is like sexual violence. Right. And the fantasies that have to do with it, which have a lot of what they do is much more about the fantasies than it's even about the act of killing. But it's also, of course, taking power over another person. But trying to understand all this is I've really, and I hate to use the word enjoyed because nothing that Lou shows me is enjoyable. Cases, but it's how you learn. If you don't learn how these bad people think, then you're never going to have much success in stopping them. And I don't mean just catching them. And catching one is a big part because they get away with it way too long.
Yes.
Look at these the Green River Strangler and how many victims. But also, ultimately, what causes people to go this haywire? Like Jack the Ripper, who I've studied for many, many years. Why? Because I can't believe a normal person doesn't come into this world thinking, it would be really fun. I'm just going to go attack people and then, cut them up and kill them. And maybe I'll even eat them. That sounds cool. Oh. No. So what engineering flaw are we talking about here that has to do with, is it genetic? Is it what their childhood? From being a detective, usually all of the above. But some of it's mysterious too, isn't it? Like, does anybody really know why Jeffrey Dahmer turned out the way he did?
No. I had Dr. Joni Johnston on, who's a profiler from the West Coast. She's been on my show. And also great FBI profiler, Jim Clemente.
Yes.
He predicted Rex Human almost exactly 12 years ago in the New York Times. And it was almost the perfect profile of who Rex Human, of course, the Gilgo Beach a murderer. Patricia, I know I was only supposed to be on with you for 45 minutes. Your people are probably screaming in the background.
There's nobody screaming, and if they scream, I'll scream back. So don't worry about it. If you
Okay,
have,
I want
if
to
you
just
have a few
read a
more
couple of
questions,
people.
go ahead.
I want to read a couple of people from the chat. Natalie Majomi, thank you for the $10 super sticker. What an inspiring guest. Patricia, have you enjoyed your books for many years? Any inkling of, I have enjoyed your books for many years. Any inkling of writing something in the era of your ancestor, Harriet Beecher Stowe?
Well, there's not many people that know that about me, but it is true. Harriet Beecher Stowe, for those who don't know, because it's been a long time ago, but she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. She was the abolitionist who had a lot to do with pointing out the horrors of slavery. She was involved in the Underground Railroad. And anyway, Harriet Beecher, who then became Stowe when she got married, on my father's side of the family, I'm a direct descendant from the Beecher family. And so she's one of my ancestors. And I heard about her way back when I was a little kid. And because my grandmother, because this was on her side of the family, she's from the Beecher side. She used to tell me stories about Harriet Beecher Stowe and about her brother, Henry Ward Beecher, who was an incredibly famous evangelist back in the day. And so, I remember one of my earliest poems I ever wrote this was when I was 9 years old. I wrote a poem about Abraham Lincoln's assassination. And you have to wonder, why would a 9-year-old kid be thinking about that? And I think it's because some of it might be in my genetic memory, but I think some of it is probably from stories I heard my grandmother telling when I was really little. But I will tell you that Harriet Beecher Stowe and I write about the same thing, which is the abuse of power. It's about people who do evil unto others because they can, because they're in a position, whether it's a serial killer who's grabbed somebody, or, somebody who's got a gun and can shoot somebody, or oppressing people because you have the power. And that if everybody would be mindful of do not abuse power, if you don't do it, nothing bad will happen. What a different world. It's even the way you treat a waitress, the way you treat housekeeping in your hotel room. People abuse power every day in little ways, and you should abuse it never. It's wrong. And it leads to big, bad things, including homicide.
Patricia, I really like you.
Well, I like you too.
It's just that I never know what someone's going to be like. And, not everyone you interview do you like, but I immediately took a like to you. I just want to read another comment from the chat. Bama Chin, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Thank you. It's not Dr. Bill. You can call me Sergeant Bill for having Patricia Cornwell on. What a treat to have a Renaissance woman on the show.
Well, that is a very kind thing to say. I am Renaissance because I think I was born back there. But I look in the mirror these days, and so. But anyway, but I've enjoyed being with you. My favorite people are the people who do the real work. I always say that you're my heroes. Whether it's the medical examiner, the detective, the NASA scientist. You people that go out there and you do the work and you know what you're doing. And without you, I wouldn't have stories. And so I'm always grateful and your biggest fan.
Right. One more time here up on the screen. There we go. Patricia Cornwell, Identity Unknown, coming out officially October 8th, but it's available now for pre-orders. You can go on Amazon and, bring this to 105 million. I was trying to be politically correct. Give it at least a 5 million. Maybe it should be 110 million.
That picture you showed a minute ago that shows me sitting, and you can see my blue high tops that I have on, the blue high top shoes.
Oh, here we go.
You see that? Okay. Well, I'll tell you a funny story, because if you know anything about designer shoes, Prada shoes have that red stripe that you're seeing up the tongue of that shoe. Well, some years ago, about during the time or when I was spending a lot of time with Barbara Butcher at the medical examiner's office, I also got a tour of the men's unit of Bellevue Hospital. And I know, Billy, that you're familiar where the forensic unit up there, where you have these patients that are, literally like in cages. And I was walking through getting a tour of this rather a little bit creepy. Okay. I'm just going to be honest. And one of these inmates yells out to me, "Love your shoes." It was like Hannibal Lecter, "Love your dress." And because I had on a pair of Prada loafers and you could see the red stripe on the back, he knew what they were. Now, here's what's interesting about this. Don't ever forget that even if you're not paying attention, someone might be paying attention to you. So be careful about signals you transmit, particularly in public, because I always say, if you want to understand the way a predator thinks or how victims get picked, when you're going to the grocery store next or whatever, as you're walking through the parking lot, look at everything there through the eyes of a serial killer. And if you do that, guess what you're going to notice? The baby shoes hanging from a rearview mirror. Da 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 da. What is that telling you? Or the gym bag in the back of the car, where the tag shows you the person's home address, and there's something else that makes you think it's a female. If you start looking at the information that people, here's a good one and a terrible one. If you go to a convention, do not wear your name tag outside of that event place, because if you're walking down the sidewalk, you forgot you got it on. "Hi, I'm Sue Smith from Orlando," and you're going on, you're going to have lunch and you're going to go shopping for a minute and you forget your name tags on, and then somebody is watching you and they stop and they say, "Oh my God, Sue, what are you doing here?" And, I'm trying to remember, I don't remember the last time we saw each other, but how are things in Orlando? And she goes, "Oh my God. And who are you?" And I say, "Well, it's been a while that we met, but we had the nicest conversations. Where are you headed? You want to get a cup of coffee?" Next thing you're sitting down with a rapist,
No, you're right.
And so, and you police, that kind of crap. You know what happens, but your average person, they're not thinking about the information that they might be showing to someone that shouldn't see it. And I was reminded of that day on that prison unit in Bellevue when the guy saw the kind of shoes I had on. And I said, next time you go to a forensic unit in a psychiatric hospital, do not wear your Prada shoes. Maybe wear Converse or something. Wear the same thing they wear in prison. I'll wear my Converse shoes.
That's right. Wear uniform shoes. To your point, my wife does something that drives me nuts. She'll pull up in a car and she'll stay on her phone for 10 or 15 minutes. And I'll say, "Don't do that. It drives me crazy. You're putting yourself and everyone in danger, because who do you think a criminal is going to see? So a woman in a car on her phone texting, you're an easy target." And I tell her that all the time.
Predators, and they're a lot of people, they have sensibilities. They have like sensors and radar that you talk about facial recognition. They got a different kind of recognition. They recognize who's going to be dangerous, and they also recognize who is going to be a victim, and they recognize who is vulnerable. And when I used to ride with the police, and we'd end up on homicide scenes, and I'm dressed just in my regular clothes like they were. Do you know that inevitably people would come up and start talking to me instead of to the cops? And the reason why is they could tell I didn't know what I was doing. They sensed that I did not have. They would not have come up to you. They came up to me because I looked like a pushover. I looked like I didn't quite belong there, and they were going to take advantage of that. And I learned really early on from riding around with the police how you have to act certain ways, or you're sending signals to these people that you don't want to send.
Right.
And so I learned how to act. I learned how to act more like you guys. So that I wouldn't be noticed.
I spent 6.5 years in anti-crime, plain clothes, 3 as a cop and 3.5 as a sergeant. I could look at someone, tell you what crime they were going to commit by the way they looked or the way they were acting, going in and out of side streets and all that type of stuff. And I learned so much from working in plain clothes. And that's why my radar is always up. And that's why when my wife does that, it drives me out of my mind. I say, "Stop doing that."
But people really do. I was talking about this earlier with somebody else about how important it is to listen to your gut. We get these intuitive feelings. Gavin DeBecker calls it the gift of fear. But I look at it as like a seismograph, and something you're picking up on something that's giving you a signal. that's firing in your brain. You're getting like a little peak, some kind of signal up there, like you're a spectrum analyzer picking it up because of that guy in the elevator. Or you're walking down the street and it's a really deserted area behind a bunch of buildings and you're just getting some exercise and you see someone coming towards you. And for some reason that signal fires. And maybe you're wrong about it, but I'm telling you what, go the other way. And disengage, vanish. Don't get on that elevator. If you get that signal, what I do is I just suddenly pretend I've got a phone call, and I just walk away and say, yeah, hey, I'm getting ready to leave. I just make it up. And trust your gut. So many people have ended up the victims of violence because they were afraid of offending the person who wanted to help them carry their groceries up on the elevator, that, this person they've never met before. And their biology is saying, don't. But your brain's saying, oh, be nice. He's just a nice young man. That's just a nice lady. Next thing you know, you've been robbed, raped, murdered, who knows what. So listen to your intuition because it's really a powerful tool.
You're 100. I say that all the time. Instinct is 100% correct almost every time, And
these days, if you walk around like you're talking about your wife looking at the phone in the car, sitting there, well, it's the same thing. If you're so busy looking at your phone when you're walking around in public, then anybody that's a potential predator is realizing you're not paying attention, especially if you got the earbuds in. That to me is, I just think that is so dangerous. Not only can you not hear a car, if it's coming up if someone's lost control and they're driving up on the sidewalk, you can't even hear them.
No.
Your brain, you're shutting off a very important detection device in your biology. But again, I know police know this, and I learned a lot of this from running around with people like you, Bill, that, be aware of where you are. That good old Sergeant Harding that wouldn't let me wear my sweet little uniform, when I wanted to ride that first time in my life. He would drive me crazy every time I rode with him. He was so funny. I love this guy. He's a big old huge guy. He'd be smoking his cigarette, drinking his coffee in his old beat up Ford LTD, with all the air fresheners hanging from the mirror and all the crap in the car, and we'd be driving along and then he'd say, where are we? I don't know. He called me Patsy. He said, Patsy, you always know where you are. What if I get shot right now? What are you going to tell the radio when you call in the Mayday? And I'm looking around and all I'm seeing are damn trees everywhere. He said, and so I learned, look at every street sign you go by so that if something bad happens, you know where you damn well are. But I can still hear him saying, where are you? And I'm thinking, oh no, I didn't look.
Patricia, that is one of the most valuable lessons you could get. Because if you go on the radio and say, 1013, 1013, that means nothing. What means something is 85th Street and Broadway. All right. Now we know where to go now. But 1013 didn't mean Michael O'Keefe, who shot and killed Kiko Garcia, that started the Washington Heights riots. They couldn't find him for about 15 to 20 minutes. He was laying there all beat up next to a dead body who he just fought for his life with, and they couldn't find him because he didn't know where he was. And it took them like 15 minutes to find where he was.
You know what you and I should do? We should write a little book called Policing for Dummies, and that teach people all these little rules of how to stay alive. Like, this isn't just about riding with police that you should know where you are. When you're riding around at all, you should know where you are. Yes. I mean, what if you're a passenger and there's an emergency and you're calling 911 and well, now these days, of course, with phones, they can track all kinds of stuff, but you want to be able to say, I'm at the back of this house. It's at blah, blah. And so pay attention to your environment because it's a good way to stay alive.
100%. One last time. Patricia Cornwell, Identity Unknown, available October 8th, and you can get it on a pre-order right now. Patricia, it's been amazing. I mean, you're such a great person.
Well, it's been fun. Well, I've loved talking to you, and we'll do it again sometime.
Anytime. I would love to. I would love to. Maybe I'll have your buddy on, Barbara Butcher, with us.
Oh, you know what? That would be too much fun to be had because she is like crazy funny. She has there is no one else like her. But you know what else? She is an excellent investigator, and she's got a massive heart. She's kind to people. One of the things that I was struck by when I hung out with her at the medical examiner's office in New York, in Manhattan, is whenever we would go out to do anything, she had knew all these homeless people by their first name. She'd go, "Yeah, what you doing?" And then she'd slip them a little money, and she's like the mayor, you
Yeah,
know,
she is.
because the men's shelter is, I think, right across the street from her
Yeah.
office, or her former office. But I watched her with people. And I used to always say, because I would come in to see her, and I would come through that lobby in the medical examiner's office, that old building with the ugly
Yeah.
blue tile, you know it well. And what I would always remind myself of is, you're one of the few people walking in this lobby who wants to be here. Nobody else who's coming in that lobby. And you would see the family members sitting there because their loved one is back there getting an autopsy. And I would always remind myself of that. And then Barbara made it, that's the way she felt. She has such empathy for those people who have had such terrible loss. And I feel very fortunate to have her as a friend.
Absolutely. Patricia, again,
And you should read her book if you've not.
I get it.
Her memoir. No, I know you have, but everybody else, read Barbara's memoir.
What the Dead Know is Barbara
What the Dead
Butcher's
Know.
book. Tell you the truth, when I read that, I didn't know a lot of things about her. And I was like, whoa, and
Well,
I'm not going to give up.
she's a brave person.
Yes.
And that somebody just unflinchingly honest. And that book will inspire a lot of people, because it's not just about what it's like to be a death investigator in New York, but it's also about what it's like to be her and her struggles and the things that she has overcome. And of course, the dark world that you travel through, that people don't realize what that does to you, to take that darkness home when you've been out all day long chasing killers, or seeing the aftermath of what they've done, like Barbara, when she'd show up, and she shows us how she's dealt with that darkness.
Yes, with that macabre sense of humor that she has.
Well, and also overcoming things that would have done somebody else in,
100%. Patricia, again, if I could, I'd give you a hug, but
we'll do it we'll hug some other air hug.
we'll give the air hug. Folks, this is Patricia Cornwell. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and best of luck with your new book and
Thank you.
Your life in general. Enjoy.
Well, thank you, and same to you. And we will do this again. I have a feeling you and I have a lot we can talk about.
Thank you, Patricia. Folks, Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Thanks for tuning in. God bless everyone. Have a great day.